Hey guys, we have one chapter left of Things Fall Apart, and that is chapter 25. It's pretty short, so follow along with me, and then make sure that you are finishing up selecting evidence that you can use in your Unit 3 essay. Chapter 25. When the district commissioner arrived at Okonkwo's compound at the head of an armed band of soldiers and court messengers, he found a small crowd of men sitting wearily in the OB. He commanded them to come outside, and they obeyed without a murmur. "Which among you is called Okonkwo?" he asked through his interpreter. "He is not here," replied Obierica. "Where is he?" "He's not here." The commissioner became angry and red in the face. He warned the men that unless they produced Okonkwo forthwith, he would lock them all up. The men murmured among themselves, and Obierica spoke again. "We can take you where he is, and perhaps your men will help us." The commissioner didn't understand what Obierica meant when he said, "Perhaps your men will help us." One of the most infuriating habits of these people was their love of superfluous words, he thought. Obierica, with 5 or 6 others, led the way. The commissioner and his men followed their firearms held at the ready. He had warned Obierica that if he and his men played any monkey tricks, they would be shot, and so they went. There was a small bush behind Okonkwo's compound. The only opening into this bush from the compound was a little round hole in the red earth wall through which fowls went in and out in their endless search for food. The hole would not let a man through. It was to this bush that Obierica led the commissioner and his men. They skirted round the compound, keeping close to the wall, and the only sound they made was with their feet as they crushed dry leaves. Then they came to the tree from which Okonkwo's body was dangling, and they stopped dead. "Perhaps your men can help us bring him down and bury him," said Obierica. "We have sent for strangers from another village to do it for us, but they may be a long time coming." The district commissioner changed instantaneously. The resolute administrator in him gave way to the student of primitive cultures. "Why can't you take him down yourself?" he asked. "It is against our custom," said one of the men. "It's an abomination for a man to take his own life. It's an offense against the earth. And a man who commits it will not be buried by his clansmen. His body is evil, and only strangers may touch it. That's why we ask your people to bring him down, because you are strangers." "Will you bury him like any other man?" asked the commissioner. "We cannot bury him. Only strangers can. We shall pay your men to do it. When he's been buried, we will then do our duty by him. We shall make sacrifices to clean the desecrated land." So this is like the ultimate irony here at the end, because we know that Okonkwo has worked his entire life to gain honor and prestige, and ironically now he has died the most embarrassing, not honorable death, to the point where he will be buried in the evil forest. It's really sad, that this has happened to him. Obierica, who'd been gazing steadily at his friend's dangling body, turned suddenly to the district commissioner and said ferociously, "That man was one of the greatest men in Umuofia. You drove him to kill himself, and now he will be buried like a dog." He couldn't say any more. His voice trembled and choked his words. "Shut up," shouted one of the messengers, quite unnecessarily. "Take down the body," the commissioner ordered his chief messenger, "and bring it and all these people to the court." "Yes, sir," the messenger said, saluting. The commissioner went away, taking 3 or 4 of the soldiers with him. In the many years in which he had toiled to bring civilization to different parts of Africa, he had learned a number of things. One of them was that a district commissioner must never attend to such undignified details as cutting a hanged man from the tree. Such attention would give the natives a poor opinion of him. In the book which he planned to write, he would stress that point. As he walked back to the court, he thought about that book. Every day brought him some new material. The story of this man who had killed a messenger and hanged himself would make interesting reading. One could almost write a whole chapter on him. Perhaps not a whole chapter, but a reasonable paragraph at any rate. There was so much else to include, and one must be firm in cutting out details. He had already chosen the title of the book, after much thought: "The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger." The end. Okay, now, I know you're thinking, you're probably like, I hate this ending. A lot of students get really mad. They're like, why did I follow the story of Okonkwo throughout this whole thing? And then it just seems anticlimactic. Like, the way that it ended that way, it just killed him off. I felt the same way. And I mentioned at the beginning of our reading of the book that this is not a beach read. This is not a book that I would read for the story. That's really not what it's about. This book is an argument that the author is making, and it's making an implicit or unstated argument. And so one of the things that you needed to do throughout the entire book was try to figure out what you think the author's argument is. A good way to do that is to look at symbolism, particularly of the character Okonkwo. So who or what do you think Okonkwo symbolizes? I think that there could be more than one interpretation, and I mentioned them in the last YouTube video. I think that you could interpret him as being kind of a pre-converted version of the author, if you wanted to. And in that case, I think his death kind of represents the death of the old Chinua Achebe, and maybe in that scenario, his son is kind of the his rebirth as a Christian man. And in that case, of course, suicide would make sense because his conversion was by choice. But I think that the most popular theory of what the symbolism is that Okonkwo symbolizes the traditional Igbo culture. And in that situation, we have to look at what happened to the traditional Igbo culture. It no longer exists in the way that it once was. It's very, like the Igbo still exist as a people, but their way of life, their belief system, and all of that has been dramatically changed since the 1800s when this book takes place. So essentially their culture died. So if Okonkwo is meant to symbolize that, then obviously the author has to kill him off at the end. So then the next question is, why suicide? It might be surprising that the author didn't have the Westerners shoot him, that the missionaries didn't actually kill him themselves. So what do we associate with suicide? We associate choice. It was his choice to kill himself. So then the next question is, who or what does the author blame for the death of the traditional Igbo culture? Well, if Okonkwo symbolizes the Igbo culture, then it sounds like the author is actually blaming the Igbo culture, at least in part, for their own demise. And that was kind of what, Okonkwo was saying all along. He was saying, you guys are allowing these missionaries to come in and change our ways. And it happened very slowly to the point where a lot of people weren't noticing it until it was too late. But that's what ultimately happened. Now, I don't think that the author is completely blaming the Igbo. And the reason that I say that is because obviously Okonkwo was pushed to commit suicide because of what was happening with the Westerners. So they were kind of the catalyst that set things in motion. But he was ultimately the one that hung himself. So I think that the author is making an argument in this book that kind of casts blame on all parties. I think he blames the missionaries, I think he blames the Europeans. I think he also blames the Igbo for allowing this to happen. And to some degree, I think he also blames onlookers, which are people like you and I. We're not from Europe. We were not involved in the imperialism of Africa. But I think he's saying that people around the world were kind of aware of this, even if just a little bit. And we didn't really do anything to preserve the culture either. So I think one of the big purposes of this book, like I mentioned previously, is that the author is trying to give us a different perspective of the African culture, one that's not white, one that's not driven through the eyes of Westerners. And I think that the end here, where it's talking about, it's got the commissioner here at the end, this little blurb where he's talking about the book that he's writing. This is supposed to be kind of an ironic example of what white people or what Westerners tend to do with the African story. We take it, we diminish it, we flatten it, we make it two-dimensional. This entire book is written about Okonkwo and his people, and there's a lot of depth and complexity to it. We know that now because we've read it, we've talked about it. So the ultimate irony, of course, is that the commissioner at the end says, well, I could do maybe a whole chapter talking about Okonkwo. Well, maybe not a chapter, but maybe a paragraph, We have to make sure that we have room for other things. So it's definitely a comment on the fact that we just read a whole book about this guy, and yet this white commissioner is thinking that he might struggle to write a whole paragraph about him. So I hope that you understand the story and the symbolism behind it and appreciate the depth of it. Make sure you guys answer the questions, and then you need to get started on your Unit 3 essay. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.